Welcome to HigherEdLive. This is the weekly web show where we as higher education professionals discuss emerging roles of technology and communication and how they're impacting higher education. I am your guest host today. My name is Ashley Hennigan, and today we're going to be discussing social media and how it has a presence within your admissions office. But first, let's get talking about our sponsors. HigherEdLive is sponsored by Integral, the creator of the Schools app on Facebook. Be sure to check out their webinar series about how they can help you leverage Facebook to increase yield and retention. That happens this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're sending out a tweet with that link right now. Omni Update is the leading content management system provider for higher education. The company's web CMS, OU Campus, is secure and scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and awesome user communities. In fact, it was ranked the highest in customer satisfaction in a 2010 .edu Guru survey. So if you need a CMS, you can check that out at omniupdate.com. And HigherEdLive is also sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game. It's about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Head over to scavengeru.com and check out a video interview with Patrick Powers about how Webster got over 50% of their freshman class to engage with Scavenger through a week-long orientation program. The video is really cool. In fact, the Chronicle recently wrote it up. And you can see the interview at scavengeru.com/client interviews. We'll have a link coming out to you shortly with that info. I'm going to get right into the show today. Again, I'm your guest host, Ashley Hennigan, and I'm Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Rochester Institute of Technology. Today I'm joined with Brian Apfel. He's the Director of Social Media and Online Initiatives for the Admissions Office at Marist College. And today we're going to be talking about advanced topics in social media, specifically for admissions professionals. We'll discuss social media tools that are available and how they can be used to influence your enrollment outcomes. Following along on Twitter today, you can follow us with the hashtag HigherEdLive. If you'd like to join in our conversation. You can also connect with Brian and I after today with our Twitter handles up on that slide for you now. I'm at Ashley Hen, and Brian, who will be joining me in just a second, is at Brian Apfel. So we're going to get started. I want to welcome Brian to the show. How you doing over there, Brian?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on today. This is actually a rescheduled show, our second attempt at our discussion about social media and the admissions toolbox. Our first attempt, we had some technical issues, so I do appreciate you coming back and meeting with us, having this open dialogue today. And what we want to discuss and get into is not your average social media discussion. We really want to kick things up a notch for those advanced viewers that are tuning into HigherEdLive. But to get started, Brian, I met you over the conference circuit over the past couple of years. I think we have a lot in common, and I'm always interested when I talk to other people in higher education, especially in admissions, to find out how they got into this crazy business. So where did you get started, and how did you end up where you are in this new pretty exciting role that you have at Marist?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me. And when I was probably in college studying marketing, if I had to write up a list of 50 jobs that I thought I might be doing after graduation, higher education was probably nowhere on that list, just because I really didn't know much about it or what it entailed or what being an admissions counselor actually meant. But as I started working in the admissions office as a student, I really found it was a nice mix of my marketing education and then mixed with the counseling that I really liked doing and liked working with people.
Great, absolutely. Similarly, in my case, I was a student who started in the admissions office. and I, was a tour guide. I sat at the front desk during reception, and when it came time to graduate, they just couldn't make me leave. I wanted to stay on board and continue what I was doing. So now you're in this new position at Marist, Director of Social Media and Online Initiatives. Can you tell me, a little bit more about what that means? What's under the umbrella of those responsibilities? I think a lot of folks, including myself, are curious as to how that position came to be, because I can't imagine that was something that was on the books even just last year.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it was. I worked in the admissions office just as a traditional counselor, recruiting and traveling for Marist, but always just had a passion for social media and really some of the benefits that it could have in higher education, for colleges, for marketing, just a little bit of everything. So just as a side fun project, I guess you could say, started working on that stuff and really found a passion for it, and also really found a need for it. And there was a lot of students, for example, one of the things that I was absolutely shocked with was about 25% of our incoming freshman class that's at Marist right now deposited before ever doing an official tour and information session. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And, now, is it just social media? Absolutely not. But, I figured if you don't have the opportunity, let's say you're coming from overseas and you don't have the opportunity to visit a campus, instead of watching their informational videos or doing their virtual tours that they have on campus, sometimes just checking in on a Facebook or following a Twitter feed really gives you a better feel of what the day in the life of a college student is. And I really found an importance to that and a passion for it, and it's been growing pretty rapidly.
Right, absolutely. I mean, a couple of those points you make about the population of students that we're enrolling, we know that there's an increase in those first generation students, first ones off to college, an increase in students with an interest to travel more nationally, especially students from California looking a little bit more on the East Coast, and maybe not having that ability to make that campus visit. So what are we doing online to allow them to engage as much as a student that can make the trip to campus? But I wanted to kind of backtrack on one of your other points about how you got into social media in the office, because I think that's really a key here. This was something that you had an interest in, something that you found you liked and wanted, maybe it was carving a niche out for yourself in the office, but this is really stuff that you need to enjoy doing because it is a 24/7 job. I'm sure that you soon found out, and of course I've absolutely found out. And so for those people that maybe haven't establish a social media presence within admissions and are thinking about it, something to think about is who you're putting in that role, and it being someone who needs to not just understand this stuff but like doing it, and maybe it's not the recent graduate, maybe they're not socially savvy or tech savvy, and it's certainly not the secretary that you think just has some free time.
Or sometimes they don't fully understand your brand, and that's also a really, really important part. Is before you jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, like you really need to appreciate what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes that secretary at the front desk that's just tweeting every now and then, or even the recent graduate, they understand the college as a student, but not maybe what you're trying to accomplish as an office. And that's a really great point, especially backtracking to your target audience of maybe the families that can't afford to go visit colleges, especially that are far geographically. That's something that maybe a fairly recent graduate may not understand. They may understand Twitter and Facebook, but they may not really understand your mission and your brand when they're jumping into that position.
Absolutely. And I want to quick hop over to a Twitter comment while I have it here. A comment from Don White, who's out in Hawaii. And he asked about those students who are looking from overseas and looking at your campus, but talking about places like China that do have a big cohort of students looking to study in the U.S., but have blocks on these social networks like Facebook and Twitter. So, is social media really helping them to engage. And one thing that I typically stress, and it's not just for students that are in places that don't have access to Facebook or Twitter, but these communications need to not just be in that social stream or on that social media platform, but they need to be pushed back to your website too. Thinking about Twitter use and the high school student that might not be as fully engaged on Twitter as your current students or your alumni, but there's a lot of really great content out there that you're providing, that your current students are providing, and needs to get pushed back to your website so that people can see it there and engage there. So I just wanted to quick address that comment while we're
and then also
discussing it.
Sure, also just knowing where your audience is and what they want is and the China example is a perfect example. For example, one of the things that we've found a little bit more successful than Facebook and Twitter overseas is our blog. And essentially what our blog is all of our students and all of our faculty and staff are invited throughout the entire Marist community to write posts on anything that they want that's going on in the college environment. So we have trips down to Broadway that the students are writing about, but also their internships or maybe even their study abroad experiences over in those countries. And so, or current students from China that are then at your institution, maybe having them write a blog would be a great way for that peer-to-peer contact for a student that is from those areas. Reach out to students that are currently going through that experience and then college search or enrolling into your institutions.
Absolutely. And I think this is a really nice segue into talking about some of these tools that admissions pros are using and accessing out of their social media toolbox. For our viewers today, we're not going to be going through what these tools are and necessarily how they work and what you should be doing technically with them. I feel like that is Social Media 101. That's a different show. Today, we're going to be kind of kicking it up a notch and talking a little bit more about strategy and using these tools that are available to you. But let's talk about the tools to start. I know, Brian, you engage a lot of your student ambassadors in your blog program and other community members across your campus. So the blog is definitely one of them. Are there other things you want to add about what you're doing with that?
Sure. First of all, one of the things that I think helped me get into the position that I am within Marist, and working with higher education social media is our ambassador program. And one of the things that I always try to remind myself, and the Dean of Admissions always tries to remind me, is that if there's something that I don't find as exciting or unique or whatever, I'm always reminding myself, but I'm not a 16-year-old kid that's looking for college. And sometimes it's what they want is more important. And so getting the pulse of your new incoming class is really important, and reaching out to them and seeing what they want. For example, we always get the feedback on our Facebook page, for example, that it's some great professional footage and videos, but we want to see what students are doing. Hand students a flip cam and walk around campus, or go to a football game, and I want to see the shaky camera with your
Right.
face painted, with your school spirit. That's what they want to see. And so, with everything, with the blog, with YouTube, with Flickr, all of that stuff, we're really trying to do a stronger push of student-generated content. I would say the best advice is 50% of what you're doing should be the beautiful campus shots taken from a helicopter, but the other 50% should be those weird angles, or, a student turning the camera at them and clicking at it themselves, but that's some of the stuff that the blog, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Flickr, I think, are the biggest things that we're using right now.
Right. And in terms of the management side of things on your end, for Facebook, your campus does have their own admissions Facebook page. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? So different than the university Facebook page, another space for them to engage just with admissions. And you want to talk a little bit about how that works? I know this is sometimes a topic of debate, whether you have your own page, whether everything's rolled into just the campus university page. I have my own separate page that I run for undergraduate admissions at RIT, separate from the larger group. But I'd like to hear your side of that debate.
Well, I'll actually let you go first then,
Okay.
because we actually have been trying to do the other side of the debate, is
Great.
really make it feel like it's a overall community. So
Right.
going to the Marist Facebook page, going to the Marist Twitter account, and getting an experience of a little bit of everything. So our /Marist Facebook page and our @Marist Twitter account is actually the admissions, and we've gotten rid of our admissions undergrad pieces. So I'd like to hear from you.
Okay.
Having those separate funnels. What do you feel?
Yeah.
How is that productive?
Well, so, and just to be correct, so the admissions office is actually fueling the university-wide
Correct.
content. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So with us at RIT, we do have our own separate RIT University Facebook page. We have our news services that run a lot of kind of the overarching content that has different target markets, and that's really what I think our separate niche page helps to address. And so the kinds of conversations, the kinds of engagement that happens on our university page might be targeted to alumni, it might be targeted to current students. Sometimes it is targeted to prospective students because they're not limited to one space or the other, but it's mostly a current community kind of vibe on that larger page, where on the admissions page, we are targeting more updates to tips for the application and when deadlines are happening, more of that student-to-student generated content and engagement where our student ambassadors can get in there. Maybe it's our alumni volunteers that are helping with our admissions program that are helping to engage in that space. But we found that giving updates about when applications are due or how you might be able to come up with a creative way to write your essay wasn't something that the larger university was really into hearing about, but our prospective students were. So that's why we're keeping those channels separate for now.
Yeah, and we definitely find that sometimes, especially updates that are really important to you, like deadlines and stuff, sometimes can get lost in the mix if you are just using one, like for example at Marist, one university-wide account for that stuff. But one of the things that we've found that we've gotten some pretty positive feedback on is encouraging prospective students to follow our overall university page, and using that as the funnel provides two things. One is sometimes through our experience, if a student is right now applying to 10, 15, 20 different schools, sometimes they don't want to follow 20 different Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, but then also within those schools, then also have to, follow their School of Comm, and then also the undergrad admissions office, and then also, and the list goes on and on. So we try to funnel it all in one general place. It's very difficult at times, and sometimes your message gets lost in the shuffle with some of that other stuff. But that was one of the main reasons why we did it. The second reason was, those things like alumni chapter events or the trips down to Broadway, even if it's not something for prospective students, it's nice to show what's going on in the Marist community. And so we try to highlight that stuff with the prospective students as well.
Yeah. And I think that stuff is great too. I don't want to get too deep into this other topic, but while we're talking about Facebook and admissions, I think it would be wrong if we didn't talk a little bit about engaging accepted students on Facebook. Or whether it's a private social network or other options that are quickly becoming available for admissions office to kind of leverage that social engagement in that post-accept time period. I am currently under debate as to what I'm going to do. Time is quickly slipping away from me for this incoming class that's coming up, and I'm looking at a few different kinds of options. But in the past, I have been managing a accepted student Facebook page, highly engaging page where our students are finding roommates and making meetups the summer before, making friends, connecting with current students, connecting with faculty members. Having a little bit of a challenge with the pages, losing the discussion boards, which is kind of bringing me to my current debate as to what kind of a solution I'm going to use this year. But I think in talking just in general terms about how these pages can get created and how they're fueled is something that we can chat about real quick. So in your experience, have you been utilizing Facebook or private social networks? What's going on at Marist?
Sure. We take a little bit more of a unique approach with the accepted students in that it is pretty minimalistic, meaning we actually found 2 years ago, it was kind of an interesting almost case study that we had a class of 20, whatever the year was, 2013, 2014, page for the accepted students so they can interact, meet their potential future classmates. And it was very, very active, and almost, a good majority of the accepted students were in there. And then all of a sudden, one of my coworkers signed on and said, "Hey, I also work in the admissions office. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me." And it almost had this sense of once they found out that a admissions staff member was in their class of 2013 or 14 page, all of a sudden someone posted, "Hey, I created a separate private group if you guys want to come and follow me over there." And they pretty much all swarmed and left our page and went and created their own just so they could talk a little bit more independently. And so for us with the accepted students, we've really tried to maintain that. We found that we create these outlets we create the page, we put it in their acceptance letter, but then we don't really touch it after that. We never really sign in. We don't monitor it by any means, and we really want it to be, one of the things that I think is really important for social media is a combination of content and generating content. And I think there was a great tweet about that recently, about managing your content, which I think we're going to talk about in a little bit, but also just encouraging conversation. And I think that's something that is lost with social media sometimes in certain offices, that they are constantly pushing content down, the student's throat. But sometimes just letting them sit back and talk to each other, or sometimes, the strategy of if a prospective student, a perfect example is, if an accepted student is posting on the wall, sometimes they're posting because they have a general question, but sometimes they're posting just because they want to start a conversation with one of their fellow classmates. And if you, as the admission staff, jumps in and answers it quickly, sometimes they're not getting that same effect. And so what we do is sometimes I have to try to sit on my hands, and when I see a question, wait and just keep my fingers crossed, or maybe send an email out to our ambassadors and say, "Hey, this prospective student asked a question. If one of you guys wants to respond, that would be great." And creating that peer-to-peer communication and interaction sometimes I think can be even more valuable than your content.
Absolutely. And that's one of the kind of beautiful things about managing a page like this is a lot of times it will self-manage, and students will provide students with answers. It is more authentic that way, certainly, building community. But what we're really there for is making sure that that information's current. And so you don't have a fourth-year student talking about orientation the way it was done 4 years ago, and you very well knowing that it's going to be very different for this student, and being able to kind of interject and make sure that the information that the students are getting is the correct information. And I think that's why you're there. You're not there to monitor, you're not there to censor, you're not there to tell them they're not supposed to talk about parties and do those sorts of things. We're not mothering them. We're there to help make sure that the information is current and it's correct.
Right. We had a great example on our Facebook page last year. A student posted a question on the class of page about our new policy of going test optional, which we did recently. And one of the students said, "No, I've heard that if you don't submit it, they're going to think you did really bad and make assumptions, so you might as well just submit it." And so 3 or 4 students started talking to each other, and then one of them then posted, "Hey, I actually just called the admissions office and talked to an admissions counselor, and here's the answer that I came up with." And so for me, it was so difficult not to jump right on there and say, no, that's not the case. This is how, this is our test optional policy. But I waited a little while, and then it really created a great conversation with some of the other accepted students working with each other, and them answering each other's questions, which I was very happy with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. So to kind of look a little bit more broadly about this, you have the tools available to you. In most cases, they're free, but I use the term free very loosely because we know our time and our other colleagues' time is valuable time. But the tools that you need to start engaging are available to you. They're ready to get, you can jump in and create accounts and log in and get started today. Start learning the material. That's not what we're here to talk about. I do want to talk about the overall objective, why we're doing this, why this is important for admissions, and that you shouldn't just jump on the bandwagon, as Brian has put it previously to me. It's not about just doing it because everyone else is doing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that we've done, which was, again, somewhat difficult to do, but every new outlet that we're going into, we normally run it for months before actually even announcing that we're doing it. And so it's almost the exact opposite approach that some people take where they're, oh no, we need a Facebook account. Let's create it and then let's mass market it everywhere so everyone can see it. Sometimes someone will sign on and see you've only posted twice and then they get bored with it and then they'll never go back to your page, versus if the first time that they're going to your blog or your Facebook page and they see that there is months of interaction on there, then they're going to be more likely to come back and return. So exactly what you were saying, instead of jumping on the bandwagon first, play with it within yourself, within your office, or assign it to someone and just monitor it internally and see how they do and see how they post, even if there's not really anyone following the page or following the Twitter account yet. Just play around with it first, and then if it is something that's going to be really good, then mass market it. But our blog and stuff, we had no idea if it was going to be any good, so we just started posting on there even if no one was reading, and it ended up really gaining momentum pretty quickly that way.
Yes, you have to give yourself that learning curve.
Right.
And I do that with my student team. I know I'm going to hire a group of students to help me with social media efforts, and I'm going to give them a few months to learn this stuff. I'm not going to say, start tweeting right now. I want you to be engaged. I want you doing this, because they need to learn the culture. They need to understand the technology, and it's going to take time. So that should be built into your strategy, giving yourself and your followers or your viewers or your readers the opportunity to buy in and want to engage with the content that you're putting out there.
Absolutely. Since you brought up the students, I have a question for you, or maybe the other people tweeting out there. One of the, I think, biggest challenges with working with students is they're not full-time staff, and sometimes they do it for a semester and then graduate, or maybe they get an internship and then they can't work in your office. I've had a lot of fantastic blogs that students have created almost as a class project, where for a semester, they'll put all their heart and soul into it. They'll finish that class, they get their A, and then it's lost forever, and no one maintains that. So working with the students, how do you train them? And then how do you make sure that work stays consistent and stays active even maybe after those students graduate?
Yeah, I could talk about this for the whole show, so I'm going to try to rein myself in here and keep it short, but I can share some slides from a presentation that I did at the regional HigherEdWeb Rochester, and I'll tweet that out later this evening. But for my students, I really treat this position in our admissions office as a rock star kind of position. My students are known on campus. They have a following on campus. So when the position becomes available, they really understand what the commitment is, and want to put in 110% because they know how visible that kind of a role is. And, a lot of that is just marketing it out to them in that position, that this is important, this is high level, you're going to be the face of RIT or Marist or whatever your university is, out to hundreds of thousands of prospective students that are out there, and we want you to be the ones that are giving the content. We want you to be the face, and I think once they buy into that, then they're in it for the long haul.
Very cool. Thanks.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about how we take these tools to the next level. We have the tools, we're using them on our own. We kind of understand how maybe personally you can use them, but in terms of building your community internally on campus and spreading that out into the rest of the world and people that might be interested in your university, how do you get started? How do you share that you have this information available?
Sure. Before you even do that, I think it's really important to, we briefly touched on it before, but I think it's really important to stress the importance of kind of what is your objective, what is your mission, what is the message that you're trying to get out there, and I think that's something that a lot of offices often kind of skip over, and really understanding. Often told me, or someone once told me, that every school has, we have a great community, but how and why and what do you do differently
Absolutely.
that maybe no other school does? And if community is the thing that you really want to push in social media, then figure out those ways to really not talk the talk, but walk the walk and prove that you're walking the walk. So like, for example, at Marist, that audience that we were talking about, the population that may not have the opportunity to come visit the campus is really always in the back of our mind. And that's really our strong mission, is to show what it's like to be a student there without ever necessarily stepping foot on campus and getting a kind of peer-to-peer feel. It's kind of our mission. I know yours is, similar, slightly different, we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and for us, the kinds of strategies that we're using, or the way we're relating to students, it changes throughout the year. It changes for the kind of student that we're trying to communicate with. We know a prospective student really just wants some information. Maybe they rather hear from a student than from an admissions counselor, but an accepted student, or even a student that's enrolling, wants a lot more attention. They want the up-to-date information from the campus. They want to feel like they're a part of the campus before they're actually physically in their dorm room. So it is a different approach for us at different parts of that admissions funnel. Talking a little bit about, and we talked about this at the very beginning of the show, but the way to engage students in your network doesn't always mean, well, we're on Facebook, they'll find us. Students know that, if they want to find us on Facebook, they can just type us in and find us. And I know that's not the way it works. But for other folks, just building a page.
Right. Yeah, I can almost guarantee, if you do a search for just like log out of Facebook or your Twitter account, and if you just do a search for the name of your college, chances are your college or university page is not going to be the one that first comes up. And so it's really, really important to make sure, once you have a strong presence, to market it and to make sure it gets out there, and make sure people are joining your community, know your community exists. I think one of the most important ways of doing that is making sure your presence is right on your homepage.
Yeah, we got a few shots of a few examples of what people are doing. Marist right there on your homepage, easy for people to see. Notre Dame as well, right there on the homepage. Easy for people to understand that this is where you can connect. Give you a sneak peek at RITs. We have our own little share button down there too. So these are certainly your first points of contact. And I know even outside of higher education, when I'm looking to connect with a brand online, I'm not necessarily going to Facebook. Sometimes I'm going to Twitter and doing a search, but I'm more likely going to that brand's website and looking for those social media icons, because I know those are the places that they want me to engage. Maybe they have a few different Facebook pages, maybe they have a few different Twitter accounts, but if it's on the website, that's the one that I can get the most up-to-date current content from. And that's where my search typically starts. And I'd imagine that's where our students' searches would start as well.
I agree. Another advice, that I would have while you're creating this brand is, sometimes if you are looking to just start this stuff, and you're trying to figure out what, should you be Bob Smith University or just Bob Smith or BSU, like how should you market it? And one of the great resources that I've found to start with is a name check. And I think you might have a screenshot of that as well. But that's a great resource. It's namechk.org, I believe. But what's really cool about that is you can type in a name and then it'll show you all of the different social media outlets and whether that name is available or not. For example, I think you're really doing a disservice to your brand if on Facebook you're Bob Smith University, but then on Twitter you're just Bob Smith, or whatever the case might be, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to find. And I've loved that resource. First of all, when first choosing a name, if you're looking to go for something, but it's only available on half of the different social media outlets, then maybe think of a different name that it's available on everywhere.
Yeah, that's a really cool tool. I hadn't seen that before.
The second thing that's really cool about that tool is if your name is available somewhere and you haven't taken ownership with it, do it right now. Right when you sign off on this this chat, everyone should go in and check those. The search that I did on there for that screenshot, if you saw, it was HigherEdLive, and I actually noticed that there were a couple that they haven't captured the name of those yet, and I would definitely recommend jumping in and doing that, because those are available, and you don't want someone else to take ownership of your brand. Even if you're not going to be using your Twitter account now or your blog, jump on and grab those names because it'll help you brand yourself later on.
Absolutely. We've got a couple more screenshots to share where universities has kind of taken those social media icons to the next level and offered a little bit more of what we were talking about earlier, of that kind of directory information or engagement on the university website. So rather than a student having to search on the Facebook page, or even just having one Facebook page to look at from a university, if there is multiple pages, a directory like the University of Miami offers, so that you can easily find the people that you want to connect with.
And I know ROT has a very similar style to University of Miami, and I really like this setup because not only can you see your main pages, but if you do want more information from the School of Communications or the School of Computer Science or whatever, you can see what outlets they are available or have a presence on.
Sure, yeah. And kind of kicking it up a notch even more, these social mashup pages or news feeds or streams, like what William and Mary offers to students, what Carnegie Mellon is offering to students. These are pages where you don't have to have an account to see what's happening with the content. You can go to one place, view what's going on. If you do have an account, you can engage by logging in from there. But that's really, really important for universities to understand, that you're pushing out a lot of great content into these social networks, but if you're not bringing it back to the pages where you are having high traffic, you're losing that audience too. So it's important to have it streaming out to those channels, but also streaming back onto your own website.
And I just want to echo what you said, because I think it's a really important point of if they're not on those outlets. And maybe parents are a perfect example of that. Maybe parents, I know a lot of them are now, but I know my mom is. But maybe a lot of parents are not on Facebook or Twitter right now. And having those collaborative pages like William and Mary and Carnegie Mellon did are a great way that they can sign on and just see what's being talked about in those outlets, even if you've never used Twitter before and you never even know what a tweet is. You could still at least check out those pages. One of the things that I don't know if you noticed on the William and Mary slide, which I thought was kind of neat, was on the top they had their official pages, then their unofficial pages, and a kind of official-ish. And I thought that was kind of a cool way that if they want to highlight prospective students, current students or alumni, sometimes putting your college's name on that is something that's very intimidating from the managerial side of things, that they don't know what you're going to tweet, and they're going to be concerned that if someone tweets something wrong or inaccurate.
Right.
So having that kind of, hey, this is an unofficial group, we're not necessarily sponsoring them, but if you want to check out what our community is saying, you could check that out here. I thought was a nice addition to their page.
Yeah. And I know Maris is going even a step further from the web and moving a lot of this content into mobile. You want to give us a sneak peek of what that's going to look like?
Sure. Yeah, we've been doing a lot right on our homepage. We have something kind of similar to William and Mary and Carnegie Mellon, where you can go and check in on all that stuff. But we're also in the process right now of updating all of our website, so it's very user accessible mobile. But then also one of the things that I actually learned from a higher ed conference, HigherEdLive conference that I went to, was not only do you have to make your website mobile, but really think about what people want to do while they're mobile. For example, is it check their application status? Is it book a visit? So not, chances are a student is not going to sit there on their phone and just research your college and go through all the different pages. Maybe there's something that they really want to accomplish, and maybe a lot of that is checking in on your social media stuff. So having a connection to, these William and Mary and Carnegie Mellon pages that we saw earlier, having something like that mobile is really cool as well.
Yeah, and I just want to bring up a screenshot of some of your social feeds that you have sitting very beautifully in a mobile app.
Sure. Yeah, and it's cool. Across the top, you can click on Facebook and Twitter, and then also within Twitter, you can click on, those are lists that we created, so you can click on current students, you can click on faculty and staff, and see a whole bunch of different people and what they're tweeting about within the Marist community. And then there's obviously a link to bring you directly to that page in Twitter or Facebook if that's what you want.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. You guys are pushing the envelope on that one. So getting back to this kind of broader strategy while we're wrapping things up, of course, we talked about who on the staff really should be managing this content. It's people that really should be living and breathing this stuff. We're engaging our students. They're the ones that, a lot of times your prospective students want to hear from. But, we didn't talk a lot about how this really is a two-way communication process. This is not broadcast media. This is a two-way street. And I know one of my biggest challenges is the listening part of this job. And so, there's tools available to help you listen. But it really, and a lot of times for me, is being in the right place at the right time. I don't know about
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We, one of the things that you put it best earlier, that if your Twitter account or Facebook account is posting stuff that's even a couple hours old,
Right.
It's just not working.
Right.
And people aren't going to rely on you and your Twitter account on the most updated information if it's just not that up to date. And a perfect example was yesterday. Our soccer team was in the NCAA selection process, and I made sure I was right up there, with the dean of admissions, who also helps us tweet. So the second we found out who we were going to be playing in the competition, we were able to tweet it and let the people that follow us know kind of what's going on. And that's something that is going to take a little, work, especially with your staff. Like, let's say you're not the vice president or the dean, within your office, and just leaving your office to go to a, sporting selection pool, announcement or something like that. It may not be easy, but, it's something that you really have to push the importance of and get out there.
Right. Or having that tweet deck open on your desktop or watching a YouTube video. These are things that are part of your job.
Absolutely.
And you do, of course, need the institutional buy-in for this. And, you can't talk about institutional buy-in without some kind of discussion about return on investment. So while we're wrapping here, I want to talk about a little bit of how you're able to manage understanding the content, understanding the results from all of your efforts, and how you're giving that back in those business-like ROI terms that our vice presidents and trustees and things like to hear about. So how are you able to kind of synthesize all of this information down into something that is understandable for people that really are far removed in a lot of cases from this stuff?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, you just have to set the groundwork right away that it is not a apples to apples type thing that every tweet means I'm getting 5 new applications. It's just not the case, and it's not going to happen. And the return on investment that maybe some of these managerial people are used to getting the numbers for, it's just not going to happen. Because it's communication and it's interaction, and you have to make sure it's clear that I'm going to show the success as best I can, but also you just kind of have to trust that it's important. Having said that, there are some great tools out there, and to be honest, a lot of the social media outlets are understanding the importance, and they're doing more tracking. Like Facebook, I think has been outstanding as far as just within the past year, some of the analytical stuff that they've added to the pages and alerts that you can get via email, has been very helpful. I find very helpful 2 things. Google Analytics I use very, very closely, specifically within our office, within our page, but then also the blog and stuff like that as well. And then a second one is Bitly. I use those a lot, which is the URL shortening tool. I use that, but there's plenty others out there. But I love that because every time you tweet, every time you post something on Facebook, I always use the Bitly account because then I can track if it's being shared, if it's being opened, if people are retweeting it, and I make sure that another thing that I do is also make sure I keep screenshots. If there's ever some great communication with prospective students or people interacting with each other, I always make sure I take a screenshot of that and I throw it into a PowerPoint. So, when the dean or the vice president says, why are we doing this social media thing? I could bring up examples of some great conversations that people have had or content that we've sent out that has received some very positive feedback. One example of that is our blog had a post on a student doing an internship with NBC, and we posted that on Facebook, and a whole bunch of different alumni that also did internships with them were posting, and they say, I agree, it was one of the best experiences, and now I'm working at NBC, and it really opened up some great doors for me. And that communication that one post had, and the interaction that these alumni were having, that prospective students were then able to see and show that it's not a unique occurrence that a student is doing an internship. It's a regular occurrence, and it's regular students, it's regular alumni, and really giving them the opportunity to picture themselves doing that is really cool. And I make sure I take screenshots of all of that.
Yes, really invaluable content, and it moves fast. So if you're not taking screenshots of it and you want to present it later on, good luck finding it because it's going to be buried and it's going to be in between so-so conversations or conversations that met a dead end and then a really engaging one that you forgot about. So absolutely keeping track of this stuff is going to help you in presentations down the road. And if you haven't been asked to present on what you're doing yet or haven't been asked for those key stories that are coming out of social media by your institution, it's coming. You see what it looks like all aggregated together. It's incredibly powerful information that can be shared all the way up the chain. So keep track, use those analytical tools and the Facebook Insights and those kinds of things as you can for your disposal. But, it's not about getting wrapped up in that stuff, of course. At the end of the day, it's about the people that are behind the social media, both on your institute's end and on the student end. And it's about the kind of engaging content and conversations that come out of those interactions.
And also with the limited resources that you do have to track ROI, make sure whatever those are, set goals for yourself. And that's something that's also really important. And then it's also really important to share with management. At least you're giving them something. For example, our Facebook page, I noticed that there's not as many 15 to 18-year-old followers as maybe we would like, and it's a significantly lower percentage. So I went in and I said, hey, that's my goal. I want to make sure our prospective student population is going to grow and that percentage is going to increase, and we're going to market this page better. So there are certain resources that are out there that you can then go at the end of the year or at the end of the month and say, this is what our population was before, and then here's what I was able to grow it to. And so if you set those goals and then achieve those goals and then brag about those goals, then it'll help you get to a place where you are getting that recognition of the hard work that you're doing in social media.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much again for joining me. We're going to be signing off, but we'll certainly be continuing these conversations on Twitter. You can tweet directly at Brian or I. Use that HigherEdLive hashtag, and we'll be happy to continue talking to everyone. I appreciate everyone for tuning in and for really acting in that Twitter stream. I've been trying to follow it and talk at the same time. There's some really good stuff out there. Again, thank you to Seth Odell for letting me take over. Twice now. We got it right this time. No technical issues.
Second time's a charm.
Second time's a charm. No third time for us. But again, thank you to Seth and HigherEdLive. Keep tuning in. We have great student affairs shows coming up tomorrow. Seth will be live on Thursday. So it's a jam-packed week. HigherEdLive. All good stuff coming your way. So thanks again, Brian. And we will see everyone else over on Twitter.
And thank you, and thanks to Seth as well. It's a great resource, I think, for higher education in general, and I was honored to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
We'll see you out there.